Okay, and we begin chapter 1 today. This is Advanced Accounting. My name is Mark Holtzman. I'm going to be your professor, and this is the first of the first videos. And we're going to start off with learning objective 1. The first thing we're going to start off dealing with is consolidations. And in order to understand consolidation accounting, we have to understand mergers and acquisitions. So I'm going to start off with, this is learning objective 1-1. To discuss the reasons and methods for business expansion, types of organizational structures, and the types of acquisitions. So companies merge for a wide variety of reasons. And I think everyone kind of takes it for granted that companies want to be larger. And that's the first mistake. We shouldn't take that for granted. That when I say, why would companies merge? And you're probably like, well, of course, because they want to be bigger. And it's not necessarily true that a bigger company is a better company. And it's possible that companies are better off when they're smaller. Economic research shows that as companies get larger, they become less innovative. For example, if you think of Coca-Cola, one challenge I like to give to students is name one completely new product that came out from Coca-Cola in the last 10 years. And you can't. There is none. There's no major success. Coca-Cola is a multi-billion-dollar company. One of the largest soft drink. I don't know if they are the largest soft drink maker. I think they're the largest soft drink maker, but they're smaller than Pepsi because Pepsi is more diversified. But you would be hard-pressed to find a successful product that Coca-Cola produced in the last 10 years. And most of their products are tweaks on existing products. They're different sized bottles. There's diet this. They changed the name of that. They changed the formula of that a little bit. They come out with a new flavor of Coke, but it's still Coke. And the company is incapable of creating a completely new product and bringing it to market successfully. That's what happens when you're a large company. So what do? Is you buy another company. Coca-Cola recently bought the company Monster. And everybody knows Monster beverages. They're kind of energy drinks that have a much younger market than the Coca-Cola products, and it's a growing market. Coca-Cola bought them because they can't create products like Monster does. And in fact, when they first bought the company was they left it alone. And they tried not to interfere in the management of Monster because they knew that if they got involved in Monster, they would shut down the kind of innovation that Monster was already known for, because big companies have a lot of trouble innovating. So that's just an example of why I say that you shouldn't take enterprise expansion for granted as a good thing. A lot of companies may be better off being a little smaller. I have a theory that the company Apple is too big, and that Apple ought to split up into about 3 different companies, and that it would completely unlock shareholder value for them. But that's just my own crazy theory. Size allows for economies of scale. What I mean by that is that there may be an ideal size for a certain company, and if the company is small, it's not able to achieve that. For example, when I used to live, there were 2 banks across the street, and they were part of big bank companies, and one bought the other. So what happened was that they closed one branch, and when they merged, they closed one branch, and everyone had to go to the other branch. So now they were able to service the customers from both branches out of just one branch and reduce their costs. That would be an example of economies of scale. Earning potential, obviously the bigger the company, the more profits that it can earn. Earning stability through diversification. I'm going to talk about diversification in just a moment. But basically what diversification does is if you acquire different types of businesses, then you'll have a more stable earnings flow. And this comes out of investment theory. Investment theory says that investors should invest in what's called a well-diversified portfolio. In other words, they should buy at least 5 or 6 different stocks in completely different businesses. So you might want to buy something in telecommunications. You might want to buy something in media. Which are kind of similar these days, in manufacturing, oil, banking. You buy companies, all different businesses. And this way, if one business has a downturn, then you still have all of these other businesses to lean on. Management likes bigger companies because then they make more money. They get paid more money. If I run a bigger company as a president, then I'm going to make even more money if my company is bigger. And running a big company is a prestigious thing. There's a certain egos involved. I think there's a lot of psychology here. But I don't think that you should just take for granted that bigger is better. Now, why do companies merge or acquire or expand? How do companies do this? There are basically three types. And I added this. I'm not sure if it's in the book or not, but I'm adding it. There's what's called horizontal integration. And if you took econ or management, you've probably seen this before. And this is when you buy your competitors. Like the example of the two banks, right? You have a bank across the street and you're tired of competing with them. You buy them. The same thing with Monster beverages. Coca-Cola saw that Monster was getting a great new market. They were unable to tap that market themselves. And then therefore, they bought the company. So that would be an example of horizontal integration. Vertical integration would be where you buy suppliers and customers. And what would be ideal is that you have what's called a value chain. Is that you buy companies that go up and down the value chain. So for example, if you're an oil company, you might buy what's called developers. They develop oil and gas wells, producers, pipelines, refineries, and marketers. Refineries, what's called shipping, and marketers. So this way you own pieces of the business that go all along the value chain. And this way, if you say run a refinery, then you might produce your own oil, you might develop new oil wells, produce them, ship the oil through pipelines into your refinery, then ship them through trucks to your own gas stations. Now, the way that type of value chain vertical integration works is not quite the way you think, because usually what will happen is that companies will develop and might produce oil out of one well, but then ship it to another company's refineries and buy from other refineries, which they ship to their... In other words, when you buy gas at an Exxon station, chances are it was not ExxonMobil station. Chances are it was not refined in an Exxon refinery. So what will usually happen is companies buy and sell from different businesses. Another example of vertical integration is you have AT&T and Verizon Wireless. And what they've done now is they've been buying, especially Verizon has been buying media companies, so that when you access media on your cell phone, you may actually be accessing content which was created by Verizon. That's an example of vertical integration. Another example would be Amazon creating its own network of distributors. So Amazon ships, instead of using UPS or the Postal Service or FedEx, Amazon has its own fleet of trucks and it ships the goods to you in its own trucks. Likewise, Amazon produces they don't produce their own goods, but they develop their own goods and they have other factories produce them. So those are examples of vertical integration. Diversification is, as I said before, when you buy companies that have nothing to do with your existing operations. Most classic example of this is Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway owns Gillette, pieces of Coca-Cola, Geico Insurance, all sorts of different companies that have nothing to do with each other. And the whole idea here is that if one business does well, if one business is not doing well, then other businesses will. And this creates a rounded portfolio for your investors. So in theory, an investor can buy stock of a conglomerate, and that's all they need to do. Now, I don't know any investment advisor that would tell you that you should just buy one company, even if it's a conglomerate. So that That was very popular in the 1970s. It's not so popular today. Let's get into some language now. What's going to happen is that you're going to have a subsidiary controlled by another company, which is called the parent. So I'm going to consistently say parent, subsidiary, parent, subsidiary, parent, subsidiary, on and on and on. And a lot of times what I'm going to refer to we. And when I'm saying we, I'm usually referring to the parent. And I hope you're not turned off by the PowerPoint slides. I wanted to get some of the basic factoids in the textbook incorporated into the videos. I haven't always done that in the past. I got comments from students that it would be helpful. The idea is that this video covers pretty much 80-90% of what's in the chapter, and if you watch the video you can skim through the chapter for anything else, and then you shouldn't have seen everything that's in the chapter. And in the past I haven't covered as much of the chapter. Students told me to cover more of the chapter, and so in this new set of videos that I'm doing, this is for the 12th edition of the book. I'm trying to cover much more in the videos, so they're going to be a little longer than they were in the past. You don't even know how long they were in the past, so it probably makes little or no difference to you. Anyway, the parent, I'm kind of going to say we. When I say we, I'm referring to the parent. Also, when I refer to a subsidiary, sometimes I'm going to refer just to a company that the parent owns, even if they don't quite control it. So if a company buys 20% of stock of another company, I might call that the subsidiary, even though technically it's not a subsidiary because it's not controlled. I do it for simplicity's sake. I hope you forgive me. If I catch myself doing it, I'll stop it. Anyway, control usually is achieved through majority ownership. There's a lot of controversy over this, and the FASB has never been quite clear. What's generally accepted is not only majority ownership, but it's some kind of governance control. Or, looked at a different way, it's risk. So whereas if you have the majority of risk that comes with an investment, meaning that you would get most of the profits from this company, then you probably have control. Likewise, if you have majority of governance, in other words, there are 10 board seats and you have 6 of them, even though you only control 45% of the stock, then you do have control. Now, the FASB has never been completely clear about what control is. We'll be talking about it. But a subsidiary is usually a different legal entity. It should be a separate legal entity. Therefore, it's a separate corporation. If you took business law, you know that corporations have limited liability. So the great thing about having a subsidiary is that whatever happens in the subsidiary stays in the subsidiary, and the most of the parent can lose is their investment. So if a subsidiary goes under, then the parent loses their investment, but they can't lose more than that. And that's limited liability. And that's oftentimes why companies set up subsidiaries as a separate corporation, and they just don't combine everybody into one big happy company. So there's a lot of history with business combinations. This particular slide doesn't go back far enough. We have the great trusts of the early 20th century. And the idea here was that you had mega investors like Rockefeller and JP Morgan and so on. And what they would do is they would buy all their competitors until they completely control a market. And they would create something called a trust. And this what the federal government started regulating this in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, and try to oversee this so that to try to prevent monopolies from occurring. But investors did discover that if they controlled a market completely, if they controlled 70-80% of a market, then they could set prices and earn very high profits. And so the government, the federal government regulates that. And to this day, you see situations where there are companies that have ridiculously high market share. And that leads to concerns that that market share is being abused. An example of that today is Google. People are arguing that Google has I think that's something like a 90+% share of internet search, which is crazy because they can control what people find, and therefore, in theory, Google could prevent people from seeing information on the internet that they don't want them to see. Furthermore, Google has huge market share. I believe it's in the 80s or 90s. I think it's in the 80s of internet marketing, of internet advertising. So